So good afternoon. My name is Jamie O'Connor. I'm the Outreach Coordinator with Family Voices of Minnesota. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today. For those of you who are not familiar with Family Voices, we are a nonprofit in the state of Minnesota, and we support families of children and youth who have special health care needs or complex health care needs or disabilities. One of the primary ways that we do that is through a network of trained volunteer support parents who have a variety of experiences navigating the different systems of care in Minnesota, be it educational, health, social, beyond that. If you have questions about Family Voices and Connected and what we do, or if you'd like to reach out to us, please feel free to check out our website, familyvoicesofminnesota.org. You can email us or call us. We are here today partnering with LeeAnn Mateffy from Courage Kenney, and she has graciously agreed to present today about transition planning. LeeAnn has been working in pediatrics at Courage Kenney Rehabilitation in Golden Valley, and for the last 32 years she's worked with children, teens, and adults in inpatient and outpatient settings in the rural and metro areas. LeeAnn has owned a private therapy practice and worked for large and small rehab companies. She currently sees children birth to 18 years old with a variety of diagnoses. LeeAnn, welcome.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll take it from here. Thank you guys for listening to this, and thanks Jamie for coordinating it from Family Voices. So I'm going to talk to you guys about teens in transition. I'm an occupational therapist, so I'm going to talk to you kind of from my point of view as an OT. I do work closely with speech therapists, with social workers, with physical therapists. So we do have a nice little team here. So as we move on, and I think I'm running the slides, Jamie. So we're going to talk about developmental levels. I think that some people are only going to be listening to this, so I will be reading my slides for those of you who aren't actually looking at the slides right now. So we talk about developmental levels. There's infancy, which is about birth to 1. Toddlers are 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 years old. School-age children are 5 to 12 years old. Teens are 13 to 17, and adults are 18 plus. So what's the definition of a teen? The Oxford Dictionary says that a teen is someone who's in the process of developing from a child to an adult. The origin of the word is late Middle English. It's a noun, and it has to do with coming to maturity from adolescence, growing up, nourishing, and all of these definitions come from the 18th century. So if we look at teens, so we'll focus on teens for this. Kids 12 to 18 are really kind of the 13 to 17 years old. There's lots of different things that they need to do as far as development goes to be successful. So some of the things are cognitive, they're thinking, emotional and social, and probably one of the biggest things that you physically can see are all the physical changes that these kids go through. So for cognitive development, this is when someone starts having more abstract thoughts. Maybe they have deeper thinking. Maybe they start to think about moral implications of things. The kids get to be focused more on the present, and sometimes they start being concerned and thinking about the future. They might have different kinds of intellectual things that they might be exploring. Maybe they might be working on some goal setting. What am I going to do when I'm done with high school? What am I doing when I'm done with 10th grade? What am I going to do this summer? They start to think about the meaning of life. You know, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And they actually start to be able to delay gratification. As far as social emotional development goes, this is an age when people really struggle with their sense of identity. Oftentimes kids are very, very concerned with peer groups. They have a greater influence on these kids than their parents do, you know, good or bad. They start having to adjust to their changing bodies. They get concerned about being normal. They're very concerned about privacy. For example, I've got an 18-year-old girl at home, and when she was about 13 years old and we went to the pediatrician for maybe one of those well checkups, she suddenly wanted to have a girl doctor, didn't want to have a boy doctor because boys might see private things. And as much as I talked to her about, oh my goodness, hon, these boy doctors have seen 100 different female bodies, she still just couldn't tolerate it and really was very concerned about having girl doctors. So we switched. Kids in this age group really start to desire for independence, and they start distancing themselves from their parents, which is hard for us as parents because we feel like they almost need more guidance from us, yet they're trying to be their own person and develop a little bit more independence. This is when they start really questioning rules and start testing limits. Somebody told me once that, as parents, it's our job to set the rules, and as kids, it's their job to push against the rules. So sometimes when you're adolescents or when my kids were kind of testing, I thought, well, okay, I guess they're doing their job as an adolescent. They certainly are pushing against the rules I'm setting up. And, you think it's just to really see, what are the limits? When will mom say no? When will dad say no? What are the things that I can do? So we really have to help them with boundaries and try to give them some safe boundaries so they can interact within those boundaries, but not in an unsafe manner. I was talking to some parents last night at a little parent meeting, and they were talking about right now, we can kind of see everything that kids do. If they have a phone, you can figure out, you can do a, search where's my phone to figure out where is my child. For those of you parents who have signed up for the Schoolology, you can figure out, what assignments have they turned in, what are their tests that they've taken, what were their grades. So when I was growing up, we didn't have any of that. If you failed a test, you failed a test. Your folks never knew until maybe the end. So that's kind of one of the areas where you can have some safe boundaries for kids where you can check their Schoolology, but if you see they're not getting their homework in, maybe you just let them figure out how to get it in. Maybe you let them fail, or maybe you give them that little reminder that says, hey, I noticed you haven't turned any homework for a day, a week, or 2 weeks. But, you kind of have those safe boundaries where they can kind of struggle a little bit or fail a little bit and try to figure out, how do they progress and how do they get the stuff done that they need to get done. Social emotional development. So this is where kids are being a little more independent. They're trying to be more self-reliant. They have some increased emotional stability, even though sometimes I disagree. I have a boy who's 22 and a girl who's 18. My boy who's 22, I don't remember him doing that kind of emotional up and down stuff that I remember my girl doing. My boy, was kind of the kid who you'd say, hey, Bill, how was school going? He'd give you a little grunt. It was fine. Whereas on the other hand, my girl, she'd love you, she'd hate you, she'd love you, she'd hate you. The day was great, the day was horrible. And, that was like within 30 seconds. That was like a lot of up and downs that it seems like kids start going through during adolescence. They start having concerns for others, not just solely self-centered. And then they start to develop more serious relationships. Maybe it was the last week, my daughter had told me that she had friends right now that would be friends with her for the rest of her life. And I just had never heard her say that before. So that was kind of interesting how suddenly kids are starting to think a little bit in the future and about, what are serious relationships they have right now. So as far as physical development goes, that's one that's, really visible. Kids are going through really big physical changes, both males and females with the onset of puberty and after. You just think of someone who's maybe grown a couple inches in 6 months or a couple inches in a year. Suddenly your body responds differently, and you have to get used to moving and interacting in a whole new body that you maybe didn't have 6 months ago. So that is sometimes easy to see. Sometimes kids are a little more uncoordinated. They don't know how to act. Feet are bigger than they thought they were. Maybe they're tripping over things. So it's, a hard time to go through all these emotional and cognitive changes, but also think of the huge physical changes they go through. If you've got teenagers at your house, if you come home, you can certainly tell when the teenage boys are at your house because suddenly you have all these huge pairs of shoes in your hallway. You don't have little toddler shoes anymore. It's just kind of challenging to see them get used to being in their own skin that's changing so much. Females are usually fully developed, and then males continue to develop into adulthood. So maybe when young males are 18, 19, 20, 22, you can still see them getting bigger. And then they also have increased sexual interest. So what's the job of adolescence? It's really to transition from childhood to being a young adult. And then how do you as a parent maintain your sanity? There's one thing parenting toddlers, super busy, you're running after them all the time. Then you are a parent to some school-age kids where maybe motorically things kind of slow down, but you're still very involved. And then all of a sudden you're parenting adolescents and young adults, and that's a whole nother challenge in itself. Okay, so developmental tasks of adolescents. So they have to adjust to sexually maturing bodies and feelings. You might have a young girl who at 12 looked like a 12-year-old, and all of a sudden at 16 they look like a young woman. So they're treated differently by people of the same sex, and also they start getting noticed by males, the opposite sex. And so that's a whole different thing for them to have to relate to. The kids develop abstract thinking skills. They might be able to apply some more complex levels of perspective taking. They develop and apply some new coping skills. Maybe they're getting better with decision making or just have more decisions to make. Maybe problem solving evolves a little bit, or conflict resolution. I kind of think of when I was a younger adolescent, my mom said I slammed the door all the time. When I was upset, she could tell if I was having a good hair day or a bad hair day in the morning just by how I was slamming doors before I left for school. So maybe kids go from being upset to slamming the door, and as the parents, you go, knock on the door, come in, let's talk about what's bothering you. Maybe a kid goes from slamming a door, going in their room, then you give them 10 or 15 minutes to kind of mellow out, calm down, to the point where they're able to come out of the room and they can start talking to you. So you just have to be patient and kind of let it progress, or sometimes you have to help kids progress a little bit. You might go into the room and say, okay, when you're ready, come on out. I'll be in the kitchen and we can talk about it. Okay, developmental tasks of adolescents. So other things that they need to look at: identify meaningful moral standards, values, and belief systems. And as parents, it's hard when those systems might be different from ours. Sometimes kids might just try on something different to see what your reaction is. So maybe you have a deep sense of spirituality, and all of a sudden one day your child comes up and says, I'm not going to church with you anymore, Mom, and I don't believe in God. I just think it's a bunch of garbage. And, are you going to blow up about it, or do you just take that deep breath and explain some of your views and tell your child, it's your decision, but you get to decide, what your beliefs are. Kids start to understand and express some more complex emotional experiences. Maybe they've had friends, they've had a fight, and instead of saying, I'm never going to be your friend again, like they might when they're in elementary school, they'll figure out, how do we remain friends but have differences of opinions, and that's okay. Kids start forming friendships that are, closer and more supportive. They might kind of start weeding off friends who aren't as supportive, or friends who are maybe a little bit more negative, or even those that don't have the same interest. So they kind of start getting a little peer group that is interested in the same things that they're interested in. Maybe that is emotionally at the same level that they're at emotionally. And they start kind of establishing, what's their identity? Are they a kid who likes music? Are they one who's studious, who likes to read books? Are they the kids who are kind to animals? They start kind of trying on little different identities. So other things that they need to do as adolescents, they need to start looking at kind of demands of increasing mature roles and responsibilities. So maybe in elementary school, they never had to think of, if they're in 5th grade going to 6th grade, what kind of classes are they going to take? Well, all of a sudden when they're in high school, so when they're starting to go into 9th grade, they actually have choices of classes to take. So maybe you as the parent decide, okay, these are the kind of classes that I'm going to sign you up for, and they have a couple electives. Maybe you sign your child up for the electives, or maybe you actually have that conversation with your child and sit down and say, okay, if you're interested in sciences, let's look at these classes, and you give them a choice of an elective or two, or maybe you just pick it. And then as they, continue to go on to high school, suddenly they have more choices that they get to make. Yep, I'm going to join choir. Nope, I'm not going to join choir. Yep, I'm going to be in this group that is a group that volunteers and helps out, or no, I'm not going to be in that group. My daughter, who just turned 18, about 2 days after she turned 18, she said, okay, I'm 18, I'm an adult, and I can do what I want to do. And so that's where the parents have to say, okay, it's great you're 18, but while you're in my house, you'll still follow these kinds of rules. And so that's where you get to say, yep, you're an adult, but even adults have to follow rules, because it's kind of interesting. It seems like when kids turn 18, all of a sudden they think, I can do what I want when I want, and they don't really realize that as an adult, we all follow rules. We all do things maybe that aren't our most favorite thing to do, but we do what we need to do to get through the day, to support our family, support our jobs, support our community. My cousin had told me that when his daughter started dating, he had told her, it's fine that you date. I want you home by a certain time, so let's say it's 10 o'clock. So he gave her date the little talk about, yep, you guys are going to go on a date. Maybe they're going out to a movie. I need you home by 10 o'clock. And he said the way he handled it is he set an alarm clock for 10 o'clock. He put it on the kitchen table, and he told his daughter and her date, your job is to do whatever it is you're going to do, go to your movie, go out to eat, whatever it is, but you guys need to be home before 10 to turn off this alarm clock, because I don't want to have to turn it off, because if I'm the dad who's turning off the alarm clock, that means you guys are late. And I thought, wow, what a great way that was to give these guys some independence, be home by 10, but they really had, more control over, okay, I got to get home by 10 to turn off the alarm. Not just I have to get home by 10 or dad or mom's going to be mad, but they actually had a little more independence in actually getting there, beat the alarm clock, turn the alarm clock off, and then they get to know that, yep, I'm doing what I need to do. I have a little more freedom, but they still, need to be following the rules of the house. Okay, what are different skills that kids need to learn as they're going through adolescence? So activities of daily living, and I'll go through each of these things in different slides in a little more depth, because some of this is occupational therapy talk. So we talk about ADLs, your activities of daily living. We also talk about instrumental activities of daily living, or your IADL, kind of higher functioning ADL. Different kind of like emergency procedures that they need to follow, some different personal things they need to take care of. What about their own health care? This might be when kids start figuring out, oh gosh, I have a diagnosis of something. Maybe I have ADHD and asthma. Maybe they need to start figuring out, oh, I take meds. I have to go to the doctor. Who's my doctor? They need to start thinking about community mobility. And community mobility could be like things like taking the bus, riding your bike, getting your driver's license, figuring out how to carpool with people, how to get rides to and from places that you want to go, and then leisure skills. Leisure skills. I am stuck on the slide. I'm not able to progress to 14, Jamie.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can take a look at it. Sorry.
There you go.
Is that right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, that's right. The other skills they need to learn, so of course they're progressing through their education. What are they going to do when they're done with high school? Do they do a Transitions Plus program? Do they do a community college? Do they go to college? Do they do a skills program someplace? What kind of vocational or technical programs are there that would be appropriate? And then living arrangements. That's a time when you get to think of, oh my goodness, this child is going to be living not under my roof. Maybe they'll be living with other kids or young adults their own age. Maybe they go to a little more supported system where it's where they have an adult who's supervising. Maybe it's more of a group home situation. I'm going to try to progress to the next one. Oh, there we go. Okay, ADLs. So as an OT, I work a lot with ADLs, and those are some of those basic things you need to do every day. You start learning how to do those when you're an infant and a toddler. So it's like feeding yourself, doing your grooming, doing your hygiene, dressing, and bathing. Are they doing this more independently? Are they doing it on their own? Do they need reminders from you? Some kids might need physical assistance. If they need physical assistance, a lot of times, I don't know if any of your kids have any kind of a physical disability where they might need help from a personal care assistant, from a PCA. But we'll work with adolescents and teach them, so just because maybe you have a spinal cord injury and you can't move below the waist and you need some help to get dressed and you've got a PCA, you still can direct your care. So maybe there's a certain order on how you want to get dressed that you can instruct your PCA how to help you with that. Or maybe picking clothing and choosing clothing would be one way that you could have a little more independence with things like dressing, even though you do technically need some assistance. Okay. I can't progress to the next one, to number 16. There you go. So IADL, that's that instrumental activities of daily living, are kind of like higher functioning tasks. So as an OT, I use something called an Adolescent Autonomy Checklist. And so in the next few slides, a lot of the things that are listed are the things on this checklist. It was developed by the University of Washington, and it actually was developed in 1984 to 1987, and I have searched every few years to see if there's an updated list, because a couple of the things are older on the list, like does a kid know how to use a telephone book or a pay phone? And the kids just kind of look at you funny, like, I don't even know what you're talking about, Miss Leanne. So this is a great checklist. I'll have adolescents check the things they can do in one color of a pencil, maybe a blue pencil, and then I'll give the same checklist to the parents and have the parents check the things that the kids can do maybe in a green colored pencil, so I can kind of see what's important to the adolescent, what's important to the parents. Are they kind of seeing eye to eye on what the teen is able to do? And then I will often have teens start picking, what are the goals, what are the things you want to learn how to do? And then I'll also have parents pick some things, what are the things that you think that are important to do? Because, our goal as parents is to have our kids be as independent as possible, and how can we help them, whether or not their goal is to live with assistance or to live independently. How can we make them be as independent as possible? So if we look at some of the things that are maybe listed under kitchen skills, and as an OT, I always look at, can they use hot things like a stove and oven? Can they use sharp things like a knife safely? When kids are littler, can they start making snacks? Can they use the different appliances in the kitchen? Can they use common kitchen tools like maybe that's a knife, maybe it's a can opener, the microwave, maybe the toaster oven? Can they help you, the parents, plan and prepare meals? Can they follow a recipe? It could be a recipe that's like on the back of a package of cookies that's maybe a 3-step recipe, or maybe it's one you guys looked together and found on Pinterest and you're going to make something and it's got lots of steps. Can they put away leftovers, like after a meal? That might be a place to start. Where do you put leftovers in? How do you put those in the refrigerator? Do you date them? Do you not date them? When's it okay to eat them? How long do they stay in your refrigerator? Are you growing little science experiments in the back of the refrigerator with the leftovers? When do you get rid of them or throw them out? I'll often work with kids when they're really little on setting the table. Can they help do the dishes? Like a little chore list that they might have. And do they know how to read labels? Maybe somebody's got food allergies. Can they figure out how many calories, what's the fat, what's the salt, what's the sugar, what's the protein? When my kids were littler, and I want to say elementary school, they each had one day of the week where they had to make a meal, so like a dinner. And initially it was starting with parent supervision. So the rule was they had to figure out what they wanted to make for a dinner, and we talk about it like on a Sunday. Bill's day was maybe Tuesday, Elizabeth's day was maybe Thursday. They had to make the list of what they needed. So maybe it was grilled cheese and tomato soup. So they need bread and cheese and the tomato soup can and maybe some milk and some butter. And then they had to make sure that they were making things that the whole family could eat. So I have food allergies, so they'd get my little list of things that I could eat. And so they'd start working on preparing meals. And it was amazing how I didn't realize it at the time, but what a great skill that was. Because we'd go to the grocery store, and I think at the time they had $20 to make the meal for 4 people. So they'd figure out where are things in the grocery store. How much does stuff cost? Do you buy things on sale? And then they'd make their meal, and then whoever made the meal didn't have to do dishes, so that was always great. The other little sibling did the dishes, but that was a great way to get kids interested in making meals, realizing that it just doesn't magically appear. And then as the parent, you could help them be safe in the kitchen. If we were making tomato soup, you on the stove, how do they stay safe with the stove? What's hot, what's not hot. So those are some of your kitchen skills. Okay, so these are coming, like I said before, from this little adolescent autonomy checklist. So if you look at things like laundry skills, can they put dirty clothes away other than the floor, or throw it in their closet, or throwing it on the bed? Can they sort laundry? And that might be just the lights is one pile, maybe darks is another pile, maybe towels is another pile. Maybe there's things that you have to hand wash that are colorful, like there's tie-dyes. We have lots of tie-dyes at our house, so I had to teach the kids you have to wash tie-dyes by themselves. Otherwise, all my clothes end up being pink and gray. Do they know how to use the washer and the dryer? Maybe just putting soap in it first, a few there, of course. Maybe it's putting soap in and turning it on. Maybe it's putting the soap in and turning the little dial to whites and then turning it on. Do they know how to use the dryer? I don't know if anybody irons anymore, if there's anything to iron, or if anybody hand washes anything. Can they fold and put away clothing? How many of my son, who's 22, he's in college, how many of his friends don't know how to do laundry and don't know how to cook? Just kind of some basic, simple things. And you think as a parent, like maybe you're helping them out by doing all of this for them, but really we're doing a huge disservice not teaching them some of these basic things, even when they're really little. Little kids who are kindergartners, they can sort laundry. They can know the difference between light colors and dark colors and towels. They can do things like bring their dishes up to the counter or up to the sink and put things away. So all those things that we take time to help teach the kids to do, it really is a useful skill for them. The next one would be things that have to do with the family. If everybody watches a TV show or a movie, are they able to remember some of the things that happened and discuss it? Sometimes parents pick certain movies that are kind of teaching movies, and can you ask questions and the kids can talk to you about it or discuss it? Are they able to take care of siblings? Maybe it's watching a younger sibling for a few minutes or a few hours. There's great babysitting classes that are offered at the community education centers. I think it's the Red Cross that still does the little babysitting classes. And even if your child isn't going to be a babysitter, it's a great class to go through because it teaches them a lot about some safety things. Do you answer the door? If somebody knocks on the door and mom and or dad isn't home, if you have pets at home, is this the time that you're supposed to be letting the pets outside when parents aren't home? The babysitting class goes through all sorts of great little safety things. I think it even does a little bit of CPR and some first aid. Can your kids participate in family discussions? Can your teens discuss things without people getting into a yelling match? So those of us who have young adults or teens who are 18 and older are going to vote on next Tuesday. And can you guys have differences of opinions without arguing? As an adult, that's even a hard thing to do if you're talking with coworkers about things that maybe are emotionally charged for you. Can you have a difference of opinion and be okay with it? We can still be friends, we can still respect people, but respect that we have differences. And that's kind of a tough thing to do when you're younger. Can adolescents help plan a family outing? Maybe it's just going to a movie, or maybe it's even going on a trip. So if you're going to a movie, what do you need to do? Well, figure out what's the movie the family wants to go to, or what's the movie the family wants to rent. You know, what time do we do it? How do we get there? How do we pay for it? Another great thing for kids is taking care of pets. And it's not just the fun part about, like, if you have a dog or a cat and you pet it, but you've got to get up in the morning and maybe feed your pet, change the water. That's something else to do before, you know, you have to go to school. Are you teaching the kids and the adolescents, like, how do they clean litter boxes, or how do they go outside and pick up after the dog for going to the bathroom? That's kind of all of those things that encompass taking care of a pet. It's not just kind of the fun little part where you pet the pet when you come home and then you go. And you know what? Sorry, you guys, I just am starting to see some questions here. I am going to look at
Leanne, I think Melissa is happy to have that question at the end. If you feel like it's more appropriate here, then we can talk about it now. Otherwise, I think that she's happy to wait to the end.
So yours is about the phone. So I'll just keep, you know what, I'm going to actually look at it because I've looked. So I'm going to read what you said, Melissa. Is everybody able to see those questions?
People who are only on audio will not be able to see.
Okay.
So Melissa was asking about writing activities of daily living goals that require constant supervision. And Melissa, I assume that means that your child requires constant supervision?
So I want to say, as an OT, I might have goals. Maybe a child is completely dependent on getting dressed. So that would be like putting underwear on, putting pants, putting socks, putting shoes on, and putting a shirt on. So we just kind of grade it to be, we can't really go from being dependent to being independent. So you try to pick the easiest thing first. Maybe getting a shirt on is easiest if you, the mom, kind of put it in the right orientation and start it on the sleeves, and then the child can lift their arms up and then put the shirt on. So we just try to do maybe one thing at once, because getting dressed in the morning is usually something that we all don't have a ton of extra time to do. So can we go from maybe the child is dependent with everything or needs help with everything to maybe this child or teen or adolescent can put their shirt on. And so maybe that's what you work on for a month, is this, your son or daughter is putting their shirt on. And then maybe the next month or the next week, depending on how quickly they're able to progress, you pick the next thing. So maybe it's just putting shoes on, and that'd be like slide-on shoes, because I know tying laces gets to be tough. And then you kind of go backwards, putting shoes on. Maybe they can put socks and then shoes on. Maybe they can do pants and then socks and then shoes. So we just kind of chunk it off in little tiny bits, because oftentimes the whole thing is just kind of overwhelming to do. And I answered what your question was. Okay, I'm going to go back to IADL. So we went through the family part. The next one, housekeeping. Okay, keeping their room clean. So you kind of think as a parent that when you say to your child, please clean your room, that it's pretty obvious. But, you know, they actually need to know, what exactly do you mean? So sometimes we'll even write a list. So cleaning your room means all your dirty clothes get off the floor, get off the bed, and they go into the hamper, or they go into the little basket that's in your room. That also means all the dishes that are in your room go into the kitchen. Having a clean room also means you make your bed. It also means that if there's any garbage, you take your garbage can and bring it to the bigger garbage can in the kitchen and empty it. Sometimes we'll do the same thing with cleaning your room. Maybe it's just one thing you're going to start with, and it's going to be the kids need to throw their dirty clothes in like the little hamper or the basket that's in their room. And sometimes for some kids, it's great. You can write a list of what they do. A little checklist is kind of fun if you're a person who likes to check things off the list. Kids, teens, even adults will take a picture of what does the clean room look like, so that they can kind of look at, okay, they've picked up their room, they've made their bed, but they forgot to pick up their clothes that are on the floor, and they can look at the picture that you guys took of what's the clean room, and then they can compare it, and you can even help them compare, okay, we're going to look at your room, and we're going to look at the picture of a clean room and what looks different. And then they might say, oh gosh, there's my dirty clothes, I need to pick up clothes. Or maybe you would kindly suggest, okay, I see dirty clothes, so let's pick those up, and then your room is clean. So some of those things are kind of tools that are helpful to use. A little checklist or even pictures are kind of nice. Sometimes with kids and teens and even with adults, I'll use a little picture schedule where they have a picture of first it's dirty clothes, and it's got a little Velcro on the back, and they can, once they're done picking up their clothes, they can take that picture off the little Velcro list and put it, on the back of the list, meaning that they're done. They look at the next picture. Maybe the next picture is making their bed. They'll make their bed. They'll take that little picture off the picture list and put it on the back of the list. So to just kind of help some sequencing things. Making bed, choosing decorations for rooms that are appropriate. Maybe there's little repairs. Maybe they need to change a light bulb, so you'd help them determine how do you do that safely. Plug the lamp, unscrew the light bulb, take it out, put a new one in, taking out the trash. Maybe that's just the trash in their bedroom. Any kind of basic sewing or mending that they might have to do, putting on a little button. Yard work. That might be things like they help you plant a little garden and you guys are growing some vegetables. Maybe they're mowing a lawn or they're helping you rake up the grass after mowing a lawn. So it might be something where you're putting it on a list on the calendar. Maybe the lawn is mowed every Saturday or every Friday. And so you give your teen a little cue that they need to do that. Then they also learn, oh gosh, it needs gas. How do we get the gas? How do we fill the mower up? My daughter who's 18 loves plants. She just got a ton of plants, and she had no idea she had to water them weekly. So she was very frustrated when everything died. So we had to have a little talk about, you have to take care of the stuff, and it needs to be watered weekly. If you have a little garden, how do you have? Do your kids like to help you do the yard work? Maybe they're raking. Maybe they're using garden tools. Next thing is emergency. So different kind of emergency things. Do you have an extra house key at your house? Do you have one of those little keypads? Does the neighbor have an extra house key if the kids get locked out? This is an important one. Plan your fire exits and what's the emergency procedure you're going to go through. So if there's a fire, what do you do? And then talk to your kids about if there's a fire, usually the lights are going to be out. It's going to be dark. So what do you guys do at your house? That's a great thing to practice. If there's a fire, there's some kind of emergency, what do they do? Where do you guys all meet? Do you all meet downstairs? Do you all meet at the neighbor's house across the street? Where do you guys have? Candles aren't always so great, because of fires. So that's something that you always have kids do with adult supervision. I actually did my pumpkins yesterday, and I put real candles in them, and my daughter came home from dance, and she was just petrified that I had real candles in my pumpkin. I'm like, Elizabeth, it's okay. I'm an adult. I can have real candles in my pumpkins. But flashlights would be a great thing too. Or the flashlights if the weather turns tough and we don't have electricity. How do they use in a fire extinguisher? There's lots of great things you can watch on YouTube. It's not always realistic. If I have kids pull the fire extinguishers here in the clinic, but we'll watch them on YouTube and we'll actually maybe go lift the fire extinguisher. They're really heavy. Do they know how to turn the water off? My son, who's 22, took 45-minute showers. So I, as the adult, went downstairs and would turn the water off sometimes because he would be using all the hot water. Do they know how to unclog a sink or a toilet? Or do they know how to ask for help if the sink or the toilet gets unclogged? And then when's it okay to dial 911? Because that's not like just something we do for fun, but it's something we do if there actually is an emergency. Can you help me progress to the next slide, to 22? Thanks. Okay. Do they have phones? Do they know how to use the phones? We already talked about a house key, a budget. When kids are really little, you can give them $5 and they get the $5 to spend at the store, and it's amazing how responsible they suddenly are when it's their money. They suddenly start looking at the little sale bins and they decide that they don't want every toy in the world when you give them a little budget. Are they helping you go do things like shop for groceries? And if you give them a budget, are they able to help you go with them to buy clothes, or maybe they're going with their friends to buy clothes? Are they doing their own grooming? Do they know when they need haircuts? Do they ask you if they can go get a haircut, or do you have a little list, like maybe every 6 weeks or 8 weeks they go get a haircut? Or maybe when they're at the haircutting place, they tell the haircutting person, this is how I want my haircut. Are they able to choose the appropriate clothing to wear to match the weather? So I can tell you when my daughter was little, maybe she was in kindergarten, she wanted to wear a swimsuit every day. No, I want to say preschool, sorry. She's in preschool, she wants to wear a swimsuit every day and just would not wear a swimsuit. So as a parent, I had to figure out, she could wear the swimsuit under her clothes. But, as you're older, that's not appropriate anymore. When you're 3 or 4, it's kind of cute. But as you get older, what's appropriate clothing to wear. How do you stay safe in public? If you are walking across the street on your cell phone, and tons of us do this as adults too, is that very safe? You certainly are at risk for being hit or having somebody walk up to you and assault you if you're not paying attention. What are you doing with your purse? Is your purse by you or your backpack by you, or are you leaving it, your backpack or your purse, and then you're getting up and you're running off like if you're in the mall or something, or even at school? How do you keep that stuff so it's safe and so things don't get stolen or you don't lose them? Okay, healthcare skills. So how do they get sex education materials or birth control? So this is, as your family, this is something you guys talk about as a family, but how do kids get these kind of things? Do they talk to you about it? Do they have an opportunity to talk to a doctor about it or a healthcare professional? We'd love it if they talk to an adult about it versus just their friends so they could get some correct information. For girls, how do they start keeping track of their cycles? And then what supplies they need? How are they bringing things to school? How are they letting you know, either mom or dad, if they need different sanitary supplies so that they have all the things that they need? Do you guys talk about drugs? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable? When my son was, I think, about 10, he has ADHD. He takes stimulants, so he takes prescription meds. And he came home from school one day. I think they started doing the DARE program at school, and he was sobbing. And he's not the kid who is like a kid who's upset easily. He was so upset, and when he was talking to me about it, he realized he took drugs. I'm like, what do you mean, Bill, you take drugs? Well, Mom, you give me medicine every day, and I'm taking drugs, and I'm doing a bad thing. And I had to tell him, oh, no, Bill, it's okay to take medicine, or we call it drugs that an adult gives you, like if you've got a headache, your mom might give you something, or that the doctor prescribes you. Those things are okay to take, but it's things that other kids would give you or things that you purchase from people you don't know that aren't okay to take. So same thing, have discussions with your teens about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable about alcohol use. And then how do you get a hold of community advocacy organizations? Community skills. Mobility. So mobility could be walking, busing, riding your bike, driving, using public transportation. How do they find phone numbers for transportation? How do they call you if they need a ride? Are you helping them open a bank account? I don't know if lots of kids are getting library cards, but how do they get a library card? How do you get a Social Security card? That's a great thing to do with your child as a parent. If they need passports or picture IDs, how do they do that? And what about a driver's license? So if we talk about driving, that's another IADL. So lots of things go into driving. So maybe it's figuring out how do you plug in a destination for mom or dad on the phone so mom or dad can use your GPS on your phone. It's a great time for you to ask them to start, looking for stop signs or looking for the traffic lights so they start being aware of their environment while they're in the car. Can they filter out information? Not everybody's going to be a driver. If you've got some sensory things where things are coming at you too quickly and you get distracted easily, maybe driving isn't something that's going to be safe, but maybe you figure out how to use public transportation. Are they aware of hazards? Oops, I think I'm ahead of myself here. Sorry. Okay, are they aware of different kinds of hazards in the environment? Maybe it's snowy. Is that a good time to go out on your bike? Is that a good time to drive a car? What are different things they need to think about? Pedestrian and bike safety. If they're using their bikes, do they have locks? Are they biking when it's dark? Is that okay? Is that not okay? Do they use lights? What's a checklist for operating a car? So that's kind of once they start getting to use cars. Now, I'm going to share a little bit about from our driver's program. about teens with disabilities and driving, but I'm just going to let you know that's not my area of expertise. I'm going to kind of read through these slides. So just a little bit about history. 1978, they started the driver's program here at Courage. 1995, they became licensed at the commercial driving school. 1990, a lot of the OTs do the driving program here, and they have special training to do it. 2013, we merged with Sister Kenney. Can you advance my next slide, please? Okay. So for driving, if kids need help, kids or adults need help, they can do it pre or post their permit. And sometimes you'll use it to see is this child, teen, someone, or even young adult. Not everybody gets their license when they're 16. Some get them when they're 18. Some get them when they're 22. Some when they're 24. And some young adults say, you know what, driving's not for me. I'd like to figure out how to use community mobility. I'm going to go to the next one. So the driving program here, we look at things like what's the medical history, what are the kids' goals. Maybe somebody just wants to drive during the daylight to familiar areas. Maybe they don't want to be driving at night or to unfamiliar areas. What are their physical skills? Do they have use of their extremities? Can they visually scan things? What are their visual motor skills? How's their reaction time? Is it fast? Is it slow? And then when you look at cognition, so are you able to do things like visual memories to another? Can you kind of visually remember even doing it while you're walking in a building from the bathroom to maybe the classroom you're going to? Are you able to pay attention to more than one thing at a time? We do a lot of observations of kids or teens or adults to see how they do with those kind of things. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Could you advance the next slide, please? When they start looking at the specialized driving, they look at controlling a vehicle. Are people able to visually track? Can they change lanes? Are they able to plan ahead? What's their processing speed? How's their memory? How's judgment? What's insight? You know, if you see a dog by the side of the road, are you going to think, oh, I need to kind of slow down because this is something that, you know, might run or might be in my way? Are they able to visually scan, pay attention to signs? Do they understand when they should be driving the speed limit or go slower? I've talked about attention span. How's visual scanning? Can they manage distractions? If they get upset really easily, you know, are they able to keep it kind of under control or regulate while they're driving? Do they need any kind of adaptive equipment to drive? So those of you who are drivers, do you realize how complicated driving is? When you kind of look at all these things, that you're like, oh my God, I'm amazed I can drive sometimes. Let's go to the next slide. So when people go through a driver's assessment, they may make modifications. Maybe people continue to drive, return to drive, or start driving. Maybe they drive with restrictions, kind of like I said before. Maybe it's just during the daylight to familiar places. Maybe they use adaptive equipment. Maybe they need some lessons. Maybe need some therapy to work on visual scanning. Or maybe driving is not what they're going to do. They're going to be a person that uses community transportation. Okay. They do all sorts of different kind of training. They do a lot of individual training where they use one of the cars here that actually has like a brake and a gas pedal. They work on different kind of problem-solving strategies, like with the parents or with the young adults for driving. And the goal is to try to have the person be as independent as possible. They can't give somebody a driver's license or take somebody's driver's license away. They can just help them prepare for kind of that task of passing their test or using a vehicle with modifications to pass a test. Can you progress the slide, please? Okay. Some of the things that help for driving are doing team sports. You're moving in space. You're having to really negotiate where your body is in space with other people. Having kids start to look at stop signs, traffic lights, like while they're in the car right now, while they're 16, while they're 18, while they're 22. While you're driving with your adolescents, you know, you can discuss, is this like a high-risk situation, it's snowy and it's dark out, it's just a low-risk driving situation. The weather's great, it's easy to see, we're going slow. Helping kids plan where they're going to drive, like route planning, and then figuring out if your child does need some additional help, for driving, where are different places that you can go for driving classes. There's different ways that driving classes are paid for. There's private pay, there's cost-sharing programs, there's folk rehab. Some people use waivers, some people use workers' comp. That would be usually for someone who's had a job. I'm going to move on. When they do the driver's program here, you don't need a doctor's referral. You're just called to set up for some driving lessons. They do lessons all over the place. If you have questions, this Kathy Woods is the driving person here, who I'd recommend you guys talk to. I am going to try to finish up, so we have a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to go to this next slide. Some other IDLs, there you go. Leisure skills, inviting friends over, reading books, watching the TV, going to school functions, going to church. We think of these things as extra things, but that's really what kind of gives your life some meaning and some value. So those are very important things to be able to look at. Other things you need to think about with your kids and your teens and young adults is education. They usually in high school, they're meeting with school counselors. They look at other education programs. There's Transition Plus programs for kids who have IEPs, so for beyond high school. Vocational technical things, talking to school counselors. There's different apprentice programs, community colleges. How do you apply for a job? How do you apply for a volunteer position? Those are all great skills to start working on. I talked a little bit about living arrangements. So there's different things like there's housing, federal housing programs for people who are disabled. There's group home or supportive living situations. What do you look at for financial assistance? Do kids and young adults understand leases? How do they fill out applications? If they're in a wheelchair or have limited mobility, is where they're going to live accessible, or is it the top 6th floor of an apartment building that doesn't even have elevators? And then just the idea that they have to pay for different things like electricity, water, and heat. Some of the people that put information together for this presentation, Jody Greenstein works here, and she does a lot of behavioral counseling. Kathy Woods is one of the driver's people, and I am an occupational therapist. I am going to open this up to questions.
I'm curious, Leanne, if you can talk about what those of us with younger children who are listening to this webinar can do. For example, my child with complex needs is 7 years old. How can we have our eye on transition and the future right now?
Daily things a 7-year-old would do. So what about things like, how is your child doing with self-feeding? How is your child doing with dressing, with picking out different things to wear? And then you kind of have to think, is it more like a physical disability, or is it more cognitive or emotional? So you might have a child who physically needs quite a bit of help, but cognitively is still at a 7-year age. As a therapist, I really look at where is a kid right now. So if they're 7 and maybe they're at a cognitive level of 5, I don't get so caught up in that. I just look at, if you're at a cognitive level of 5, how can I continue to help you progress, help you be more independent, and help you learn more? Not how do I get you caught up to 7, because for some people that's not ever realistic, but how do you promote independence, foster maybe kids having choices of things versus you doing everything and making every decision for them?
Thank you. I am sorry about the audio difficulties here, guys, but please raise your hand. Go ahead. I missed a slide you said about healthcare. Can you go back to that? And we can, I can chat about that if there aren't any more questions. And if you can't remember the slide, healthcare, I'm trying to think, it's important for kids to know, do they know what their diagnosis is? Do they know what meds they have? When my son was
oh my gosh, maybe 13, and we go to the doctor every 3 months to get, like the ADHD meds, the stimulants, I told them, you need to tell the doctor what your diagnosis is. And when the doctor asks questions, I'm not going to answer any of them. You have to answer them first. So it was kind of awkward doctor visits at first. And I did tell the physician, I'm trying to have Bill answer things, so please, point the question at him, and I will answer eventually if you don't get an answer. But it's interesting to watch your kids just kind of look at you and not even answer. It's like, honey, they're asking you the question. You can go ahead and answer. But that's a great thing to practice in a safe environment like the doctor's office.
Good idea. This slide is up now, and I think medications are something that I think about for my child.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And are there any kind of questions that maybe your children ask you as parents? And you can tell your kids, you can ask the doctor that question. It's helpful to write it down on a piece of paper because sometimes people get nervous to ask the question, or maybe you forget what the question is. And, sometimes the visits are pretty quick. So that's one nice place to start is have your kids ask a question, or have your kids even say how old they are, or what's one of the medications they're on, and what's the medication for.
Great. Leanne, thank you so much for all of this information. Does anyone else, I see a couple of comments. Tricia is really appreciating the great ideas and how specific they are.
Yeah, actually, I love that. You said to have your son ask the doctor one question. And you're right. It can even be, what's your favorite color? Just so they're not so afraid of them.
Yeah.
And they feel okay to have a voice.
Well, if there are no more questions, I just want to remind everyone that Family Voices of Minnesota has a wealth of parents across the state of Minnesota who have children either in transition right now or have already been through this process. And so if you're needing support or wanting to talk to someone from a parent perspective who has been there, then please reach out. We've seen a wealth of resources through Courage Kenney that are making me really excited at the prospect of being able to use some of these for my daughter in the future. So Leanne, thank you for your expertise, for the wonderful presentation and the ideas and resources.
You are welcome. So, and I just want to put a little plug in. The other thing with Family Voices is, you guys are located throughout the state. It's not just metro-based. And I think a thing that's huge is the peer-to-peer support. So you're talking to parents who have a very similar situation, so they, know what you're going through, or maybe have gone through similar things. But that's just worth a lot in itself, of having someone else who you feel like you can relate to. And this other person has a ton of, has lots of training and skills. That's helpful.
Perfect. Thank you again, Leanne. I'm going to stop our webinar.
Thank you. And thank you, guys. Bye.